Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome to the rare game dev video that doesn't at least directly have anything to do with Game Maker. So, I like video games. This should come as a surprise to pretty much nobody. I like 3D video games. I like 3D video games that we might collectively lump under the umbrella of low poly for at least some definition of low poly. But I've never really been much of a 3D artist, which means that when I want a 3D object to display in a video game that I make, I generally have to resort to, hacking together a bunch of primitive shapes and hoping that the programmer art doesn't come out looking too offensive. I have been for something like probably almost 15 years using this ancient thing called Model Creator for Game Maker, which is an extremely primitive 3D modeling tool that was made back in like Game Maker 7. And it wasn't elegant, but it got the job done. But in the last month or so, I have started using this program called BlockBench. And honest to God, this has made creating low poly 3D models so much more fun than it's ever been for me in the past. So, this is not a sponsored video. It's probably going to come out sounding like one. This is a free and open source project. I honestly wish I could figure out how to give them money, but there doesn't appear to be a donation button anywhere. Anyway, first things first, it can be found at blockbench.net, and there's also a GitHub page if you want to go and fork it or investigate the source yourself. And I'll have both of those things linked down in the description of this video. Now, for some backstory, BlockBench, I believe, started life as a little tool for creating 3D models that people might use in Minecraft mods, and you can sort of see that pedigree in, for example, if I scroll down here to the gallery, which shows off some of the things that people have created in it. You do get a bit of a, Minecraft-y look and feel to a lot of these, but it is a bona fide 3D modeling tool, and you can use it to just export OBJ or GLTF models for use in whatever game engine you happen to want to use, including but not limited to Game Maker. And I do want to spend a little bit of time just talking about BlockBench and how it works, because I do think that if you are a person who watches my YouTube channel for 3D and Game Maker things, there's a good chance that this might be useful to you if you don't already use it. As a matter of interest, in this Hugh's using BlockBench, this little trophy cabinet down here, apparently Minecraft itself is. I don't know if that means that Microsoft actually uses BlockBench now when they create content for Minecraft, or if this is just referring to Minecraft mods. Hytale is a Minecraft-inspired game, which I think is really what put BlockBench on the map for most people outside of the Minecraft world. It's certainly when I started hearing much more about it. Anyway, so you can go and download the installer for BlockBench for Windows, Linux, or Mac. There is also a web version. I am not going to use the web version because I don't like web versions of software on principle. Anyway, you can go and download the installer if you'd like. You can go and run the installer if you'd like. You can also go and download the portable version, which doesn't require installation if you'd like a portable version that doesn't require installation. I'm going to not go through that whole procedure because I have already installed BlockBench, and I'm going to open it up, and what you see when you first open it is going to look something like this. If you don't have any recent projects, for example, if this is the first time you're running it, then this list will obviously not be here. There's a couple different, model presets that you can select if you are trying to create something like content for a Minecraft mod or something like that. I'm just going to go and create a new generic model which is apparently intended for targeting Godot, Unity, Unreal, Sketchfab, Blender, or 3D printing. Unbeknownst to them, some of us are also using this for Game Maker, and we can just go and create a new 3D model. So, should I give this a file name now, or should I just do that when I save it? We'll give it the most boring name. So, when you open up a new BlockBench project, you're going to see something that looks a little bit like this. So, we are going to start by going and adding a few shapes, and then we'll proceed to manipulate those shapes to create something interesting. So, to do that, we are going to go up to the menu bar at the top, go to Edit, and then Add Element. And from here, we can go and add a mesh, and this is going to be one of a dozen or so different primitive shapes. Cuboid, bevel cuboid, pyramid, plane, circle, cylinder, tube, cone, torus, sphere. Let's start with a cuboid, which is just going to be a rectangular prism. And you can specify the dimensions now if you'd like. You can also manipulate the dimensions later if you'd like. When you first create it, there's going to be a little bit of UI to allow you to slide around, type in the dimensions that you'd like here. We can also just leave it as it is, and we can start playing with it ourselves. As for controls, click and drag with the left mouse button and you can like rotate the view around the pivot point. If you click and drag with the right mouse button, you can pan side to side, up or down. If you use the scroll wheel, you can zoom in or out. Also, shift and clicking and dragging the mouse up and down will also zoom the view in or out. We do not, and I kind of wish we did, but we do not have like classic WASD keys. I suspect probably because most of the keys on the keyboard are already taken for other keybinds. Anyway, to start out, we can click on these little drag handles and do the usual things, moving this object up, down, left, right, forwards, backwards along any of the axes. Of the three major components of a transform, position, scale, and rotation, you can select your like translate, rotate, or scale commands from the little toolbar up here. You can, for example, hit the S key on the keyboard or click on these little arrows up here for resize, and that will allow you to go and squish, squash, stretch, etc. this model in different directions. The V key on the keyboard, by the way, is the shortcut for move mode, for translate mode, and I do make liberal use of the shortcuts when I'm using BlockBench because you will be going back and forth between them fairly often. So that's move, scale, and lastly, of course, we have rotate. You can click on the rotate button, and that will allow you to rotate around a pivot on the X, Y, or Z axes. You can select the pivot point. You can like specify the pivot point if you don't want it to be whatever the default is. For example, if I move the pivot point up some distance on the Y-axis, I will now be able to go and rotate this block around the center of the block and not around like the world origin. Rotations can require some special attention. Those of you who have ever tried to like deal with rotation matrices and what order they should be applied know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you go and rotate your model around some axes, and if you wish to sort of bake in these rotations to the actual model, you can go mesh up here, apply rotation, and that will basically apply the rotation transform to every vertex, and it will reset the rotation. You can also right-click on the model in the outliner and say apply rotation there, and also left right-clicking on the model itself will do the same thing. Now, so far we've acted on just a like model on a shape as a whole without really control over individual faces or vertices. So I'm just going to go and undo that a bunch of times. And I'm going to go and draw my attention to up here where we have different selection modes. So selection mode object is what we're going to be in by default. If you click on an object, it will select the entire object and it will allow you to translate, rotate, scale, whatever the entire object. You also have selection mode face, and this will allow you to select individual faces on a model, and from here we can manipulate individual faces on their own. So for example, I can go and scale. Scaling along the red axis here probably isn't going to accomplish much, but I can scale it along, for example, the Z and the Y axes, and that will allow me to change the size of an individual face like this, and associated vertices around the corners will be dragged with it. What happens, by the way, if I rotate an individual face? I don't know if I've ever attempted to do that. Okay, so it does exactly what you think it does. How useful that is if you don't want some sort of weird torsion effect, I don't know. When I do this, one or more quad faces are now concave, which cause issues in UV mapping and rendering. So do you want to split the quads, or do you want to undo, or do you want to just ignore it? So texturing is something that I don't know if I want to get into in this video, because I feel like I could make an entire video just based on that. But the split quads for rotating a face seems to be what's recommended, so we'll just let BlockBench do that. I'm gonna undo because I don't really, want that. You can select, by the way, multiple faces by going and control clicking like this. You can shift click. Let me just deselect all this. You can shift click, and this will allow you to. I'm sorry. You can control click and drag, and this will allow you to select multiple faces that are contacted in the click and drag motion. One thing that BlockBench does that I kind of wish it didn't is if you do want to click and drag to select some number of faces, I need to actually have that selected. If you do want to click and drag to select some number of faces, it will also select faces that are facing away from you. And I don't know if there's a setting that I can toggle to make it not do that, but I think in most of the time when I, like, select a region like this, I only want the faces that are actually facing me. Or maybe not most of the time, but a lot of the time anyway. I haven't been able to find a setting that addresses that in, like, preferences or anything, but if anybody knows of a way to do it, let me know. Anyway, you can also use the edge selection mode, and edge selection, honestly, I don't think is that useful most of the time. You can do the usual translate, scale, rotate things with an individual edge. I suspect if I was more of a hardcore 3D modeler, I would probably find more use for that, but I generally don't. And lastly, we have vertex selection. You can go and modify individual vertices if you want fine-grained control over where individual vertices are. And of course, the whole like control select thing works for vertices and edges too. So by default, because BlockBench did start life as a Minecraft 3D model creation tool, it will generally snap pretty much everything to units of 1, at least as it'll snap like translations and scalings to units of 1. And that can be good for a lot of things, but if you do want to be able to have, say, a higher resolution over where you like where you place objects or vertices or other transformations, you can hit the control key, and this will now allow me to, for example, slide this individual vertex 1/10 of 1 unit on the axis of selection at a time. And especially if you're working with like curves or something, like curved surfaces, or if you're trying to create a like a lumpy, non-uniform surface, that can be pretty useful. Let's see, what else is there? So we do have the knife tool and the seam tool. If you've spent a lot of time with 3D modeling software elsewhere, you probably know what these do. If I click on the knife tool, I can go and basically create an outline around some region of this 3D model, which I want to make a loop cut around. I can join it back to its origin, or I can keep going. I can hit enter to apply the knife tool, and that's going to subdivide this geometry. And now if I were to go and select, say, these 2 individual vertices here, we have effectively subdivided this mesh, and I now can now treat this whole thing as if it is not, in fact, a mutated, like, rectangular prism. Again, if you do spend a lot of time with 3D modeling software, you probably know exactly what you can do with this. When you start doing stuff like this, you might also be interested in, for example, we have a couple of other options for what we do with this. For example, extruding a selection, doing a loop cut. Although I feel like that didn't really do it as it was supposed to. I don't know if that's a bug that I should report or not. Let me try and doing that loop cut on like geometry that hasn't been moved around in weird ways. Or maybe if I were to select this entire strip there, would that make it behave? Hey. Nope, that's still weird. I feel like that's a bug. Anyway, extruding selection, if I wanted to, for example, take, let's say, select this face here, and say extrude selection, I could make it pop outwards. So you can use the controls that show up down here if you want to be able to sort of numerically control this extrusion. I can move it backwards, which is, that looks very weird. Let's go in the other direction. Move in the outwards direction. I can move the face using the like the axis gizmo thing, drag handles, if I'd like. And that's an extrusion. What are these other controls? I'm less familiar with these. Create face or edge creates a new face or edge between the selected vertices. So if I were to go and select, for example, this, no, not that. How about these 4 vertices here? And if I were to say create face, is that going to do what I think it does? It does. All right, that's good to know. By the way, if you look on the opposite side of this, you will notice that these faces are single-sided. Creating double-sided faces doesn't seem to be something that BlockBench does extremely well, unless you go and do something like create a cuboid and set one of its axes to 0. That has occasionally been a source of confusion when we have tried to use this for Wizarducks, not being able to create, like, double-sided faces for, like, paper-thin objects, but minor inconvenience. Anyway, you can also click the invert face button if you'd like. flip the winding order of the vertices. Let's see, is that all the tools that I'd like to discuss? I think that's all the, like, basic operations that I'd like to discuss. There's a couple more, but I think we're getting into the, like, a little bit more niche operation business. Anyway, so if I go and create myself a second element, so let's say a second cuboid here, and let's say that I wanted to go and do something. I'm not going to do anything extremely complicated, but let's just go and drag it off in that direction. So both of these two objects are now separate objects. They do appear in the little outliner inspector as separate objects, and I can control one and not the other. I can select both if I'd like to be able to control them both. When it comes to organizing your 3D models, you can go and put them in a group, and if you put them in a group and select the group, you will be able to then control all models within the group with, like, a common transform. You also can fuse the models together, so if I were to go right-click and say Merge Meshes, this is going to merge these into a single mesh, and this will now allow us to basically force these two to be the same object. This isn't something you really have to do. I generally do it right before I export my object as an OBJ, just so that I just have, like, a single face group inside the OBJ, and so that I don't have to, like, deal with that when I load it into something like GameMaker. But probably for the most part, it's okay to just leave them as separate objects. It's also possible, if I select, like, a group of faces over here, to go right-click and say Split Mesh. And that is going to go and separate this part of a mesh from one object to another. That can be useful if you have one object and you really want to be able to, like, act on, like, half of the model independently from the other half. There also is mirror modeling, and I might get into that later, but I think there's enough stuff to be getting on with in this video.
Hey.
Anyway, there are, of course, all of these other primitive shapes that you can start with, not just the cuboid. We've got the bevel cuboid, pyramid, and so on. I'm not going to show off all of them. You probably know what these are all going to look like. The curved shapes, so things like circles, spheres down here, torus. Since 3D meshes are generally not good for modeling curved surfaces with infinite precision, you can specify the number of sides in your curved shape. So, for example, a torus will have a certain number of segments. In this case, 12 segments going around the middle. You can increase that. If you want a torus with higher definition, you can decrease that if you want a torus with lower definition. You can also can go and make like a pentagon shape if you'd really like. You know what? I never thought about doing like a torus with just 4 like sides. I could see that being useful to make like a rounded square. Anyway, you can also control the thickness of the ring, the minor radius as it's sometimes known. And all of these other shapes do have their own like properties for like their size and shape. Here we've got a ring. Oh, that would have been useful when I tried to like make a pipe recently. Didn't realize that was there. Anyway, so I think it's tradition, at least it's tradition for me, when you get started, get yourself familiar with a new 3D modeling software to make something like a table and chairs. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna go and delete all my stuff that I started with, and I'm going to go and add an element. We can go and add a cuboid, and we can start with this. Let's make a table first. I'm gonna go take my cuboid. I'm going to go and make it a little thinner. Again, you can go and make a cuboid and set one of its scales on one of its axes to 0 if you'd like an easy double-sided plane. But we're just gonna go leave it at that. How about, I did not mean to do that. I meant to hit the V key to go into move mode and not whatever I did to go into paint mode. I'm going to move that up a little bit on this axis. I'm going to now go and add another element for another cuboid. And this can be perhaps the leg of a table. Like this. And we can go and move this around. Like this. We can go and make 4 of these. If you're into mirror editing, that might save you a little bit of time, but it's just a simple table, so we're not going to lose too much sleep over it. That's a basic table with 4 legs. If you'd like to make it a little bit more complicated, by the way, Control D will duplicate. I don't think I said that before, but I have been I was doing it right there. Control D will duplicate an object, or specifically a selection. And of course you can Control C, Control V, and that will also copy and paste whatever you have selected. But if we want to make this a little bit fancier, we can go and do something like maybe this. And we can move this this portion of the 3D object up as sort of a support for that table. We can make another one there. If you really want to be fancy, you can go and make supports on the bottom too for like added structural integrity. But that's cool. If I want some on the other sides, we can go and rotate this 90 degrees like I wanted the vertical axis 90 degrees like that, or you can resize it on the various axes to put it where you want it. We can do the same thing. If you select multiple, again, control click to select multiple, you can copy and paste them both as a group, and that might save a little bit of time here. And we now have ourselves a little workbench. Alright, that's cool. Now, if you're like me, and you like to sort of min-max your triangle count, you might realize that there are a couple of faces for a couple of these objects that are, like, not exposed to the outside world. By the way, if you go into face selection mode, you can see how many faces are in your selection down at the bottom. If I wanted to go and see how many faces are in this entire model, I could go and select everything, and we can see that this table is 84 faces in total. These are generally going to be quads. These are generally not going to be triangles, so if you triangulate this, as you probably would in Game Maker, that'll be 168 faces. So, not like a lot, but if you want to, again, if you're like me and if you want to min-max your triangle count, you can go drag one of these out into the open. You can go click on a face and just hit delete to delete it, and that's going to reduce our face count to a level which might be a little bit more appropriate. There's really no point in rendering faces that the outside world will never see, is there? And you can let's go back into object mode. You can do that for all of these objects that compose this table if you'd like. I'm not going to here. There's quite a few of them. There are 8 of these like horizontal support objects which have 2 faces each, which can be deleted, which is 16. And then there's these 4 table legs which have 1 that can be deleted, or 2 if you don't care about the bottoms. And you could probably get the face count on this model as a whole down to why is it not letting me select all? You can probably work it down to about 60 or so. Again, if you really wanted to min-max the geometry. Now, when we're done with this, and I am going to pretend that I'm done with this because I don't want this video to go on forever, I can and would drag this video on forever if I allow myself to keep going with this. You can, again, if you'd like to, you can merge meshes when you're done, and this will turn that whole array of a dozen or so different objects, different block objects, into a single object. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just not do that. You can go File, Export, and you have the option to export as GLTF, which is probably the most flexible general use 3D model format. OBJ is all reliable. FBX might be useful if you wanted to bring this into like Blender or something. STL is for 3D printing. There's even an option to upload to Sketchfab integrated in here if you really like to show off your work. But we can go and export this just as an OBJ, because that makes things simple. I am going to not save this inside our Wizarducks work folder. And how about my my user folder? That ought to be good enough. If I go into my user folder, we can see this imported test_model.obj. I am not going to go and bring this into GameMaker now, but I will preview it. I have a little 3D model preview tool that I wrote that I use for things. Sometimes it's going to come in scaled way down because the for whatever reason BlockBench's like export scale is like tiny, but we can go and scale that back up. It's also going to come in with Y as the vertical axis, because if you may have noticed that the Y axis is the vertical axis in BlockBench, because nobody in the graphic design world can agree on whether Y or Z should be the up axis. And I'm just going to go and rotate the up axis, because I generally believe that Z should be the up axis. And just like that, we've got the little primitive table that we made, previewing in GameMaker. So, as for actually getting this into your GameMaker game, this should work with pretty much any OBJ importer. There shouldn't be any surprises, aside from, like, having to convert the up axis if you're, if, like me, you are using, Z as the up axis and not Y. But, again, there's not really any surprises. If you found this video somehow and you're not using GameMaker, then you should be able to take one of the exported 3D models and just drag it into whatever game engine of choice you happen to use, or into your 3D printer, for that matter. But, I do not want to save an STL file, thank you. That is a quick introduction to BlockBench. So things that we haven't gone over here are painting and UV mapping, which is a whole thing that you can do within BlockBench right here, which is very useful. I'll probably also make a video on that because it is something that we also do use quite a bit of for Wizarducks. And there's also 3D animation, which I played with a little bit. I haven't done a lot of 3D animation with this. We are not using that in Wizarducks, but it probably would be worth making a video on anyway, because the fact that you can just, like, do all that within BlockBench without ever having to go into something like Blender is really useful. And it is something that I foresee myself using quite a bit of in the future. So some honorable mentions. Another 3D modeling tool, another low-poly 3D modeling tool that people like to use in things like GameMaker is something called Crocotile. And I've used this, but it never really gripped me the same way that BlockBench did. Maybe someday I'll go and give it another shot and make a video on it or something like that one of these days. A lot of people do swear by this, so it probably is worth giving a look if you're in the market for an easy low-poly 3D modeling tool like this. There's also... and this is something that you probably shouldn't actually use because it hasn't been maintained in like a decade, but Sprytile is a plugin for Blender which allows you to do things that look not exactly like what we're doing in BlockBench, but it is like low-poly 3D modeling. Again, this hasn't been maintained in like a decade, so I wouldn't recommend actually using it. I don't think it's worked since like Blender like 2.7. But this is sort of the granddaddy of this kind of software. This was the first thing that, like, way back in the day, I know a bunch of people who use this, so I thought I'd give it a shout. And of course, there is the ancient model creator for GameMaker, which I was using with an increasing amount of like frustration up until probably about a month ago, when I finally decided that I would give BlockBench a try. And well, I'm actually having fun using this. And it actually makes it really easy for me to be able to make the sort of 3D models that I want to make. And like, I never really expected that would be something that I would say. I kind of figure that like 3D art would be one of those things that I just did because I had to and not because I actually like doing it. But that is going to be it for me for today. My name is Michael. I like Wizards and Dragons and making games. Links to all of the things that I mentioned will be down in the description of this video. If you do want to go see the video that I made about importing OBJ models into GameMaker, writing an OBJ importer, I will have that linked down below as well, because if you don't know how to do that, I suspect you would be interested in learning how to do that. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to the Steam page can be found down below. I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spydeye Games, Pixelated Pope, Paradox, Nykotic, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Brenton, Bokeh Dev, and Argo the Knot for supporting these videos. If you want to join the ranks of these very cool people, head on down to the Patreon page in the video description to join the fun.